must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
And one major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back, everyone. 47 after the hour, and today I want to talk a little bit more about marijuana apartheid, the concept that I coined a few days ago, referring to this idea that we have a medical marijuana dispensary system here in the state of Oregon that is supplied by untaxed, unregulated, unlicensed growers who harvest and stack patient cards in order to maintain their grows and sell their weed, again, tax-free, to these medical marijuana dispensaries. Remember, also, we had that story in the Oregonian recently of the fact that the largest one of these grows, these medical marijuana grows, is stacked with 104 cards, all from Californians. So that's the one system we've currently got. Very loosely regulated, untaxed, supposedly excess medical marijuana that's being donated to these stores in exchange for expenses and costs of doing business. That's the current system that exists. And then we should institute alongside of it a completely separate system, a so-called recreational marijuana system where the marijuana is tracked seed to sale, there's taxes involved, there's labeling requirements, and so forth. And I call this marijuana apartheid because we are trying to separate consumers of a product based on their inherent physical characteristics. And to me, it's wrong. It's just wrong. And today I wrote something in Facebook to kind of, illustrate how I'm feeling about the issue. Once upon a time, a fellow wished to eat a cheeseburger. He walked into a local lunch counter to sit down and order a cheeseburger. The police were called to inform the man that he could not sit down and order a cheeseburger at that lunch counter because he was not white. It was explained to the man that according to the law, this lunch counter was a place where only white people could order cheeseburgers. It's not that anybody wishes to starve the colored people. It's understood that colored people have hunger too. But the colored people need to go across the tracks to the seedier side of town and find the lunch counter that was designated for the coloreds. Now, everybody can have a cheeseburger, but it's vitally important that the white people eat their cheeseburgers only around the other white people, and that the colored people only eat their cheeseburgers around only the other colored people. It was explained to him that the white people would be uncomfortable if they had to order their cheeseburgers around the colored people. Also was explained how the white people have special needs when they order their cheeseburgers. White people, he was told, like mayonnaise and specially fed, hormone-free, antibiotic-free, low-fat, free-range beef. Coloreds, of course, like those hot sauces and crispy bacon and will accept fatty, run-of-the-mill ground chuck in their burgers. If white lunch counters had to serve the coloreds, why, they wouldn't be as likely to carry mayonnaise. And in serving the coloreds, they'd be financially incentivized to carry cheaper, fattier beef. But eventually, we as a society realized that separate but equal is anything but equal. We learned that segregation is always wrong, and that businesses eventually adapted, and the fears predicted by opponents of segregation were far overblown. There are plenty of places where people of all races can get a cheap cheeseburger, but there are still places where cheeseburger snobs can go get their precious super cow. So explain to me why there needs to be a separate building where only sick and disabled people can go buy marijuana. So that was the post on Facebook, and I got a lot of answers on it. One answer was, we can all go to the same store, but can we pay different tax rates, please? Sure. All for that. Even though in that metaphor, it would be like saying we're going to tax the colored people for their cheeseburgers, but the white people get to eat cheeseburgers tax-free. But it's not exactly cheeseburgers either. We are talking about a medicine that some people use, and when you're forced to buy the product for medicine, perhaps letting them have a tax break is ethical and moral. But that's not the point I was trying to make in that little vignette. Had nothing to do with whether or not the patients wouldn't still get special privileges. So it's not even quite an accurate vignette because I'm not completely arguing for absolute equality. Sure, make the medical marijuana card a tax rebate card. Got no problem with that. But then I got another one that said, this is a lot more like demanding that McDonald's sell steaks because why discriminate against different types of food, man? They're both beef. That doesn't exactly address the point that I was making. And maybe I can make it more clearly. Just yesterday, I went into a dispensary. And in that dispensary, there were 32, maybe more, probably 50 jars, stock full of dried usable marijuana. Of those, 40 to 50 different jars, there were 2 that were high CBD, low THC. 2. The other 48 or so, good old-fashioned get you fucked up marijuana. Now, I don't deny that the good old-fashioned get you fucked up marijuana may indeed have a medical purpose for that person who needs that particular strain. But you can also not deny that I can buy that same strain and just get high. So it's not like steaks and cheeseburgers. No, it's cheeseburgers and cheeseburgers. We're talking about the same exact cheeseburger, the same White Fire OG, the same Cinex, the same Bubba Kush, the same AK-47. It's the same. Regardless of whether eating that cheeseburger is curing your anorexia or just filling your tummy on a nice day. This would be like, it's not like asking McDonald's to sell steaks. It's like asking there to be separate restaurants for anorexics. The other fear here is we will see people screaming that we cannot sell high-potency products in recreational stores because what about the children? The argument will make perfect sense to most people because if you just want to get stoned, you could smoke more. But if you're a patient, you might need some super intense high-potency marijuana to deal with your condition. Should you be subjected to the best practice for recreational use to govern your medicine? The straw man rears his ugly head. No, my argument has consistently been set the bar high enough for the medical user, and that'll be more than good enough for the recreational user. Make those bud tenders be trained to know the medical this or the medical that. The recreational user who goes and buys the AK-47 may not care. But that information's there if he wants it to be there. And this idea that only the patients need the super high potency stuff and the recreational users will be banned and have a lower potency selection is making my argument. It's making my argument that my shops are going to discriminate. My shops aren't going to let me get the 100 milligram Chiba Chew. I'll be stuck with the 15 milligram and the medical people will still have their 100 milligram. And then you know what happens? I keep a caregiver card and I keep shopping at the dispensaries. And so do a whole bunch of other people. And those patient rolls continue to increase even though we've legalized marijuana. And those tax revenues that have been expected from the legalized marijuana fail to materialize. And the legislature starts going, well, wait a minute. Sure looks like there's a whole bunch more gaming of this medical marijuana system going on. Let's start cutting on that. Let's make it tougher to get your medical marijuana card. Let's raise the price of the medical marijuana card. Let's make it stricter to get a chronic pain diagnosis. Let's require that the clinics have a bona fide doctor-patient relationship with very strict restrictions on it. I see my move as eventually leading to the long-term best results for the patients. I see keeping it separate with marijuana apartheid incentivizing the gaming of the medical marijuana system that threatens patients. This other argument, let's see. If your only gripe is that you think regulations will forbid you from entering a medical store, by all means, fight for the right of any adult to purchase marijuana from either a recreational store or a medical store, but don't insist the two stores be combined into one. That seems to me an even sillier argument. Let's have two completely separate types of pot shops run by two completely separate, different authorities. The Oregon Health Authority on one side, the Liquor Control Commission on the other side. Let's have two completely separate supply systems, one that's being supplied by card-stacking medical marijuana patients, the other one that's being supplied by licensed and regulated growers who are taxed. But let everybody shop at both of them. That's just... How far are people going to keep pushing this absurdity? You know, the medical marijuana argument made a lot of sense when the choice was not use marijuana and die, use marijuana and go to prison. That used to be the choice for the sick and disabled person. Use marijuana, go to prison. Don't use marijuana, die. Now we've got a situation where no one using marijuana will go to prison. All of the context for the arguments of what about the poor patients and let's think of the poor patients, that context is gone now. It's no longer a crime. It's no longer we're patients, not criminals. It's now we're cannabis consumers. There was another argument brought forth that said the reason there needs to be separate pot shops from dispensaries is because localities can ban pot shops, but they can't ban dispensaries. So we've got to keep them separate in case somewhere out there in Eastern Oregon, the conservative rednecks out there vote to ban pot shops. That sounds a lot to me like, well, you know, them Southerners in Alabama will never, ever agree to integrate the schools. They'd rather close all the schools in that case. So we better keep the whites-only schools so at least the white kids get some education. Segregation is always wrong. I have no problem if a retailer under one set of regulations and one set of suppliers wants to only sell medical stuff. Just like I don't have a problem with Hong Fat, the Chinese grocery store out there on 82nd, posting all their signs in Chinese and selling a bunch of weird-looking vegetables I'd never want to buy. That's any retailer's right. But don't tell me I can't go shop at Hong Fat just because I'm a white guy that doesn't speak Chinese, because segregation is always wrong. How much simpler does this need to be? 50 years of the civil rights movement. We should have had this lesson learned by now. We'll talk more about this in hour 2. Thanks. I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.